I recently became the victim of my wife's infidelity 2 years ago, and it totally destroyed my family. I'm a 31-year-old male, and my wife is a 27-year-old. For this, I will refer to my wife as Deidre and to myself as Dave. We have two kids, a daughter age 4 and a son age 2. I'll call them Sammy and Timmy. We got married nearly 6 years ago. I'm not going to get specific about my line of work, but let's just say I have a good job. My wife and I met in her final semester of college, and we got married 13 months later. She followed me to the East Coast, where I worked for 4 years and where our kids were born. Earlier in the year, I was given a promotional opportunity to run one of our offices located within 15 minutes of both our hometowns. Deidre and I were excited to move back home, especially after having kids, and our parents were overjoyed. Both my parents and her mother still live in the area, as does my younger brother. Deidre's dad passed away before I met her. Our families were, of course, excited to have the two of us back home, but were really excited about being able to see their grandkids on the regular. As things worked out, my mom and dad had recently moved into a new home in a 55-plus community and were planning to keep our family home and rent it out for income. Our family home is a historic structure and is just a beautiful place, sitting on over 3 acres of land with a small creek flowing through the wooded lot on the back of the property. Instead of buying a house, Deidre and I decided to move into the family home and pay rent to my mom and dad. My parents want to keep the home in the family and pass it down to me and my brother, and they'd like us to do the same. My parents and brother didn't want the rent money, but I insisted since my dad recently retired and was counting on the rent money for income. Paying them rent was like paying myself anyway, since my parents are leaving everything to me and my little brother. Okay, like I said, this house is very special to my family, and my parents treated it with great TLC over the years, but there were a few things that needed done after we moved in. Since it is a historic home, it has unique fixtures and features that require specialization. My parents have been working with a local contracting company for the past 35 years who has done nearly all the major repair work on the house. One of their specialties is working on older homes, and they do a great job. So anyway, after getting a list of projects together, I called them and got an estimate. The owner came out and walked around the house with me. He's a great man and has built a great company. If you look at the reviews for this place online, they've got like an 82% 5-star rating, 16% 4 stars, and that's out of nearly 700 reviews. Most companies like this have review scores that average in the 3 range if they're lucky, so that tells you something about this outfit. A couple weeks after getting the estimate, the company started the repairs. They moved quickly and always had the project area cleaned up at the end of the day. My wife and I were very pleased with their work and professionalism. The work was primarily done by 3 of their craftsmen, but one guy in particular completed most of the projects on our home. Let's call him Brock for this posting. Brock was a very personable and polite guy that was about my age. My daughter referred to Brock as the window man as she saw him through our second-story windows while he was working out on the ladder. All repairs were completed on time, and we were now settled in at the house. My wife and kids loved the place, and I loved my new job. Everything was going well until I had an innocent conversation with my daughter. My wife had gone shopping with her mom and my mom, and I was watching the kids. We were playing out back, and my daughter was running all over the place, and when she got tired, she jumped up on my lap. We were just talking generally, and then, out of the blue, she looked at me and said, "I saw Mommy napping with the window man." Now, before we go any further, let me state my daughter is a highly gifted child. I know all parents feel that way about their kids, but with her is true. She is highly gifted. Everyone who meets her immediately recognizes it. Her doctors recognized it, and we had her tested before we moved, and she scored one of the highest scores the clinic had ever seen for a 4-year-old. So I knew what she was telling me was very likely factual, although there was a possibility this could have been something she made up as she does have a remarkable imagination. I was shocked and asked her to repeat it, and she told me the same thing she just said. I asked her to tell me what happened and how she saw them. She said my wife put Timmy and her down for their afternoon nap. Sammy said Timmy dropped his binky behind his bed and was crying for her to get it, but she couldn't reach it, so she went looking for her mom. I asked her if she called mommy, and she said no. She said she walked over to our bedroom door and opened it and then called mommy. I asked her what she saw, and she said mommy jumped up out of bed with a blanket wrapped around her and ran over and kissed her, and then took her by the hand to get the binky and to tuck them back in. I said, "Where did you see the window man?" She said he was lying on daddy's side of the bed. Hearing this hurt so bad, but I didn't want to show emotion, so I said he was. She said yes. I then asked her what happened next. She said mommy left their bedroom and I heard her talking with the window man and they went outside. I asked her what she did next. Sammy said she got up and looked out the window and saw him driving his truck down the driveway. I gave her a big kiss and thanked her for telling me. She then said something that really broke me. She said mommy told her to show let's keep this our secret, okay? I asked her what she said back to mommy, and she said I told mommy okay. Again, my little girl was smart, and somehow she sensed what she saw wasn't right. Again, I didn't want her to be upset, so I made light of the situation and said thank you so much for telling me. I'm so proud of you. Now this can be our secret, okay? She said okay, I won't tell mommy I told you. Then she said daddy don't tell mommy I told you, and I told her there's no way this is our secret. I then tickled her to break the mood and we started laughing and talking about something else. I could tell the secret my wife asked her to keep was really upsetting my daughter, and after telling me, I think she felt relieved. My wife came home with our moms in tow and she summoned me to come inside with her while our moms went out on the back porch to watch Sammy and Timmy. When I got outside, my wife showed me a gift she bought for Sammy. It was a gift Sammy picked out for her birthday, which is not until October. I asked why she bought it now, and she said she wanted to give it to her now. This was surprising as Sammy wasn't asking about this gift and was not expecting it until her birthday. Also, my wife and I have a clear understanding with Sammy of when she will get large gifts. She knows it's only on her birthday and Christmas, and she accepts this, and like I said, she has never mentioned the gift again since she chose it a couple months ago. My wife justified the purchase, saying she's such a great kid and has been so good lately. I wanted to reward her. I hope you're not mad. I told her I wasn't mad, but I immediately sensed this was a bribe of sorts for Sammy to keep my wife's secret. When my wife gave Sammy the gift, Sammy was concerned and said I wasn't supposed to get this until my birthday. What am I going to get then? Deidre told Sammy, you've been such a good girl, mommy and daddy want to give you this now. Sammy surprisingly said no, I want to keep it until my birthday. I don't want it now. My wife kept coaxing her to open it, but Sammy didn't want to and looked at me for backing. I spoke up and told Sammy, let's take this upstairs and put it in your closet. My wife was stunned by Sammy's reaction, but it didn't surprise me. Like I said, she's very smart and she didn't want that gift until her birthday. We took the gift upstairs to her closet and she seemed relieved and not have to open it. When Sammy and I came back downstairs, my dad and brother had arrived, so we spent the rest of the day eating and enjoying family time. I was going through the motions and having fun with my family, but my mind was preoccupied with what Sammy told me. Later that night, I was going to confront my wife, but decided not to since if what Sammy said was true, my wife would likely deny it. Instead, I told my wife I needed to wake up early Sunday morning to do some work for my company using our home computer. She was fine with this and asked if I wanted her to get up with me to keep me company, and I told her no. When I woke up, I did a complete check on our home computer and there was nothing. Then I went on her phone and entered her password and again nothing. I thought to myself, did Sammy make this whole thing up? She could have, but her details were too descriptive not to be true. The rest of the day we spent over at my parents' visiting with my aunt and uncle who had flown in from out of town. I hadn't seen them in over 2 years, so it was good to visit with them and to introduce them to Timmy, who they had not yet met. We had a great day and everything appeared to be normal with Deidre. She was her ever-loving self and showed no signs of anything. I returned to work on Monday, but the thought of what Sammy told me was still on my mind. So several times during the day I drove over past my home to alleviate my suspicion. I did the same thing on Tuesday and then again on Wednesday. There was nothing, but I just had a strong feeling Sammy was right. I thought of hiring a private investigator, but instead I decided to buy a camera system at Best Buy. I installed the camera system when Deidre and Sammy were out attending an evening event at our local nature center, and I was home watching Timmy. I placed the camera outside near the garage looking down the driveway, a second camera in the living room, and the third camera in our master bedroom. I placed each camera where they could not be seen unless your eyes somehow stumbled upon them. I was concerned, however, that my wife may notice the camera in our bedroom. Though it was up on the crown molding and completely blended in, as our crown molding is white with black trim, it was in sight if you were laying on your back looking straight at it. I turned the system on when I left for work every day and turned it off before I arrived home. Since my wife and kids don't spend much time in the living room, our bedroom, or on the driveway during the day, they did not set the cameras off much. When the cameras are triggered, I receive a text alert. Everything was normal until the following Tuesday at 1:46 p.m. when I got an alert from the driveway unit. When I checked, I saw a truck from the contracting company coming up the drive. I then saw Brock get out, walk up to my front door, open it, and go in. I next got an alert from the living room camera, and there I saw my wife kissing Brock. Worst fears confirmed, Sammy was right. With this, I rushed out to my car and started heading toward my house. On the way, I called my mom and told her what was happening and asked her to meet me at my house as soon as possible. My brother, aunt, and uncle were also there, and I told her to bring them. On the way over, I spoke with them on the phone. By this time, I had gotten an alert from the bedroom and knew what was likely happening there. I was really upset but held it together, giving instructions to my family. I told my mom and I wanted them to take the children outside when I confronted Deidre. I then asked my uncle and brother if they could accompany me in my bedroom when I confronted Deidre. I explained I wanted them as witnesses and to prevent me from doing something violent. They readily agreed. We parked on the driveway down from the house, blocking Brock's truck in, and walked up to the front door. The door was unlocked and we all entered the house. Our bedroom is on the back of the house, so there was no chance the cheater saw or heard us approaching. I led the way with my brother and uncle right behind me and my mom and aunt behind him. The noise from the bedroom drowned out any noise we were making walking up the stairs and down the hall to the bedroom. My heart was beating out of my chest at this point. I motioned for my mom and aunt to go past us to the kids' room. I then looked at my uncle and brother and asked if they were ready, and they nodded yes, and with that I opened the door and walked in. My wife screamed, "Oh no. Oh my God," and with that Brock dismounted and fell back on the floor, started apologizing and reaching for his clothes. I had my phone out and was filming and said nothing. I just stood there in silence, moving my phone camera back and forth. Brock continued apologizing and getting dressed while my wife had the sheets pulled up to her face and was crying, saying, "This wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean to hurt you, Dave. I love you so much. I'm so sorry." After a couple minutes, Brock was fully dressed and sat on the floor with his hands covering his face and was continuing to apologize while my wife kept crying and apologizing. I told Brock to get the F out and he quickly left. Before leaving, I told him, "Don't think about taking your truck. We have it blocked in, and I will be calling the company to come and pick it up." I then called my mother-in-law and explained to her what just happened and told her to come over and pick up her daughter. My wife was still laying in the bed under the covers, pleading with me not to make her go. I ignored her. My mother-in-law arrived shortly thereafter, and when she did, my uncle, brother, and I left the bedroom. I then heard my mother-in-law yelling at my wife as she sobbed. To my surprise, my wife left the house without incident. When she left, she rushed out with her head down, crying, and didn't say anything. I think she was in a total state of shock and was also highly embarrassed. My mother-in-law apologized to me, gave me a big hug and kiss, and told me she loved me. After they left, I went out back to see my kids and then called the contracting company. After I explained the reason for my call, they put me through to the owner's cell phone. He apologized profusely and said he would see to it that his company did everything they could to make this up to me. I thanked him and ended the call. About an hour later, the company dropped by with someone to pick up the truck. Brock was nowhere in sight. The following Monday, I took the day off and met with a lawyer to start divorce proceedings. I also secured an attorney from the same firm to handle the situation with the contracting company. While I respect the owner and the company he's built, I want to receive some level of compensation for the damage their employee inflicted on me and my family. From that day, I didn't speak a word to my wife. She's called and texted me nonstop, apologizing, begging forgiveness, and asking me for a second chance, but that's not happening. Against the advice of my attorney, I've moved all my wife's stuff out and had my brother and a friend of his take it to her mother's house. The way I got things working was that my wife and her mom come to my house at 6:30 a.m. Her mom comes in and my wife waits in the car until I leave for the office. Then she goes in. I work until 5 o'clock and then head out to grab dinner at a restaurant and then come home at 6:30 p.m. My wife and her mother have dinner with the kids before I arrive back home. When I'm about 5 minutes out from the house, I call my mother-in-law to advise her. My wife then goes out to the car while her mom stays in the house with the kids. When I arrive, I ignore my wife sitting in the car and go straight in the house. I usually talk to my mother-in-law for a few minutes to recap the day before she leaves. I then spend the next 12 hours with my kids and repeat this cycle 7 days a week. I know this may seem extreme to some, but I wanted nothing to do with my wife. If I could, I would have banned her from ever seeing my kids again, but I know that wasn't happening. I have extreme anger for what she did to me. The fact she had a strange man in my bed while my kids were in the next room, then instructed my daughter to lie for her, that is beyond forgiveness to me. I instructed my lawyer to go for full custody, but she said we would not get it, but we do have a shot of getting 50-50 custody with my home being designated as the child's primary home. My wife continued to have the mindset that she was going to win me back somehow and kept coming up with new things to offer me, thinking that will sway me. She came up with the idea that I could have a one-sided, open relationship with as many partners as I wanted, but she would still remain faithful and would sign a post-nup agreement with those stipulations. She started seeing the therapist 3 times a week and had her mom convinced that she went temporarily insane for a couple weeks, and that was why she cheated. This is a crock of BS. Of course, she knew exactly what she was doing. I've since read that the claim of temporary insanity is a ploy women sometimes use to try to excuse their cheating. I didn't buy any of that, and I didn't speak a word to her. My mother-in-law asked me several times if there was any way I could forgive and reconcile with her daughter. I love my mother-in-law and didn't want to get into a discussion with her, so I just told her that I could not. As for the idea of my wife being sorry, I do believe she was sorry. Sorry for herself, that is, and sorry she got caught. I think in her twisted mind, she thought betting Brock was okay as long as she did not let our relationship suffer. She had the nerve to send me an email explaining how, even during the affair, she always gave me 100% of herself, including 100% of her body. As time went, I remained focused on getting divorced as quickly as possible. She grew more and more desperate as she tried daily to talk to me, but I only communicated via email and only about our children. When she brought the subject of our relationship, I simply replied each time that our marriage was over and that we will only have a co-parenting relationship. Well, fast forward a few months later, and I finally divorced Deidre. The process, however, was much more difficult than anticipated and was filled with drama, which delayed the final proceedings. My mother-in-law told me that she started talking about ending it all and saying if she didn't have me, she wouldn't want to live. My mother-in-law asked if I could speak to her, and I resisted, but eventually met with her in the presence of my mother-in-law and my mother. In the meeting, Deidre elaborated on how sorry she was and told me everything she was willing to do for me if I just give her a chance. She kept asking me to just give her 6 months so she could prove herself. I let her go on until she was talked out, and when she was finished, I told her that I no longer see her as a romantic partner and was not interested in any form of reconciliation, even if it was just for one day. After this meeting, her mom told me she became deeply depressed and stopped going out of the house. In fact, my mother-in-law would come over at 6:30 a.m. when I left for work. She would dress the kids and fix them their breakfast, then take them back to her house to be with Deidre. She said Deidre was withdrawn from them and spent most of the day in her room crying and pining for me. My daughter noticed and asked me why mommy was crying all the time. This was very upsetting to her and to my son Timmy, although he is young enough where he doesn't notice as much. I explained to Sammy that mommy and I are living in separate houses now. I told her that Timmy and I are living in our house and mommy is living with Grammy. After I explained this, she was okay. Her primary fear was that she would be moving to Grammy's house too. She loves her Grammy and her mom, of course, but I think she loves me more. She was worried about moving out of our house and leaving me in her room and the creek where she likes to play. I told her that would never happen. After hearing this, she was fine. The drama with Deidre didn't stop there though. As the date for our final divorce hearing grew closer, Deidre became more desperate and was calling and texting me multiple times per day while I was working, reiterating all the things she will do for me and how I would be the happiest man in the world if I'd stay with her, and she promised me that. I'm paraphrasing now, but you get the picture. Well, the day before the hearing, I got a call from my mother-in-law informing me that Deidre was rushed to the hospital by ambulance. They thought she was having a heart attack. She was admitted and tests were run. In the end, it was determined that she was suffering from severe dehydration. Her mom told me she hadn't eaten anything for the past 3 days, but said she was drinking water. Apparently, she wasn't and got severely dehydrated. I think she did this purposely to delay the final divorce hearing. Well, her shenanigans worked as the hearing was delayed until after the first month of the year, then was delayed again due to weather. Finally, in early March, the hearing took place and I was granted a divorce. Overall, I think I made up pretty well, all things considered. We are in an at-fault state and I have video proof of Deidre's cheating. The videos were not necessary though, as Deidre and her attorney gave a full written confession to the judge. In terms of the division of assets, I ended up keeping nearly 63%, as the judge allowed me to retain everything I brought into the marriage. Even so, Deidre ended up getting $71,000 from me, as well as child support, but no alimony. Like I said, I made out pretty well, but the idea of paying child support to her just burns me. We split custody 50-50, with my home being the primary home. I'm paying my 50% and also paying her 50%. How is this fair? Shouldn't she have to contribute? The court system seems to be totally rigged against fathers. So that's where we are today. We still have the same 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. arrangement 7 days a week, and it's working well, especially for my kids, as they get to see both parents every day. I'm back on speaking terms with my ex, but only about our children. If she asks me how I'm doing, I just redirect her and say, let's keep it to the kids. Now to answer a question I've gotten from many respondents here. Have I told anyone else about the conversation I had with Sammy where she told me mommy was napping with a window man? The answer is no, and I don't plan to. At least not anytime in the foreseeable future. I promised Sammy that was our secret and that it will remain. As for Sammy, I may end up telling her in 20 or 30 years, but for now I hope she has completely forgotten whatever she saw. She has never mentioned it to me again and seems as active and happy as ever. So I don't plan on discussing it with her again. That's the end of my story. Not a happy ending, but just about as good as you can get considering the circumstances. Dave, thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Until next time, I'll see you again. Around the time my wife and I were celebrating our 15th wedding anniversary and oldest daughter's birthday, I used my wife's phone without her knowledge and found that she had Googled questions about divorce. I was shaking as I looked through her phone messages. I figured if I didn't know this, I might not know about something else, and I was right. She was messaging a girlfriend of hers about how she was tired of me, tired of being a housewife, and wanted a chance to live her life how she wanted. Her friend talked about another man that she thought was me, but my wife corrected her, saying she was thinking of her boyfriend. Her friend advised her to file for divorce and end the marriage before she was caught cheating. She should have taken her friend's advice, but my bored housewife said she needed more time to secure her future life in advance. She wanted to make sure AP was ready for her to move in. She admitted that she planned to have AP over at our house the next time I left for a few days. I didn't know if this was the first time or just the only time she told her friend about it. She was saying terrible things, but she expected her friend to understand, not criticize her. Her friend said she was living an unfulfilled life, so she had every right to do what she wanted. That's when my wife added that she even planned to let me have full custody of our kids. I was shocked and heartbroken. It was like she didn't realize or care about how much this would affect them. I searched her phone for any secret messaging app, but I couldn't find anything, so I didn't know who AP was. I sent myself proof of this conversation and put my wife's phone back exactly where it was, moving away from its icons before she came into the room. I looked really upset, but I used that to add credibility to my lie. I said I just got off the phone with my boss, who needed me to go on a business trip in place of a sick coworker. She looked pleased about it, but had to pretend she was disappointed. She snatched her phone and left the room. I packed and gave my wife a heartfelt goodbye and kiss. She didn't know it was the last time I would kiss her. I drove somewhere else for 2 hours. When I came back, my mom's newest husband's car was outside her house. My heart was racing as I recalled the last time we had a family gathering. My wife was definitely talking to him. I couldn't hear much, but she had flirty eyes and stood really close to him. We attended their wedding 2 years prior, and my wife said he looked incredible for his age. I'm sure his wealth didn't attract her at all. More family outings came to mind where my wife and stepdad were alone or could have done something right under my nose. I then went through the back door because the lock was broken. Thankfully, our kids were staying with friends for the weekend. Finding the downstairs empty, I went upstairs and knocked on the locked bedroom door. I heard my wife suck in air that she didn't let out for the next 20 minutes. It took her 2 minutes to open the door, and I could hear more than one person scrambling around to clean up and get dressed. When she opened the door, my mom's husband was standing shamefully beside her bed. It was the only place to stand in the room. The bed was quickly made. You could tell they were just on it. So I told them they were caught. I knew they were sleeping with each other because I saw my wife's phone earlier. AP looked ashamed and extremely embarrassed to be in this position. My wife was only upset because her future was now uncertain. Knowing who AP was, I concluded that she expected him to leave my mother so they could move in together. Now the tables had turned. I had proof. So even if she changed her mind and just wanted to keep the affair going, or AP broke up with her, there was no going back. AP asked me to forgive him and promised that if I didn't tell my mother, he would rededicate his life to making her the happiest woman alive. I just gave him a cold, hard look since he thought I would actually buy that garbage. He looked at my wife for a split second, saying he made a huge mistake by seeing her without my knowledge. I don't think he could say what they did out loud. I asked, but he just crossed his arms, covered his mouth, and looked down. I asked if they slept together, and he shamefully nodded. My wife then said she was wrong for betraying my trust and needed me in her life. She said she was sorry for believing she was bored and needed a change. I asked my despicable stepfather to leave. My wife begged me to get into bed with her and let this go. She said 13 out of 15 years of loyalty isn't too bad, and I should be able to forgive and stay with her, meaning she was having this affair with AP for 2 years since their wedding day. I told her she was disgusting to ruin my mother's marriage and ours, and she was going to lose her husband, children, and home because of this. The tears started flowing again, but I did not care. She was not the person I thought she was. Later that night, I slept in the guest room without saying another word to her. I also called my mom and told her what happened. She was absolutely heartbroken, but thanked me for letting her know. I stayed in that room for the time it took to get the divorce finalized. My mom was also planning on divorcing AP. I didn't tell the kids what happened, but I'm sure they knew something was going on since me and their mom were quite distant. I think my wife hoped I would change my mind last minute if she behaved honorably while we went through the motions. AP swore via text he would never forgive himself, and he vowed to me that he would never see my wife again. I wondered if he realized he just gave me proof to show my mother. Not that I needed it, she would probably believe me. While waiting for the divorce to become final, I told my wife that her income was going to pay all the bills. That was the least she could do for the heartbreak she caused me. She agreed, and she spent lots of time with our children, which was bittersweet to me. I saved up money and sold some of my baseball card collection to gather enough for a down payment on a house. It had two sections, one for me and one for my mother. Then, just after the divorce was final, I told her the truth about her husband. She was devastated, but at least I was able to soften the blow by telling her about our new way of living. She took a week to have it out with AP and back her things, but I was there with her. No one should have to go through this, but when I considered keeping the truth from her, it didn't feel right. After proving my wife's infidelity and willingness to give me the house in custody, the judge found it impossible to believe her lies. She was forced to move in with the only person willing to have her, which was her boss. You can imagine how awkward it must have been when she had no choice but to fire her due to her poor job performance. I sold the house to help me pay off the deluxe duplex with 3 bedrooms each. My kids love the house and told me they're old enough to understand that life is full of change. They actually thanked me for handling this as well as I could for them. Opie, you've been in quite a disaster here. I can't imagine how badly I would have reacted to what you came to discover that fateful day. You handled this right from the start, and I respect you for obtaining a new home for your children and mother before burdening them with the truth. You spared them much of the stress and worry that you endured, and I am proud of you. You turned a miserable situation of dishonesty and uncertainty into something that could be overcome. Your wife and stepfather were inexcusable. They lied and hid an affair from the people that trusted them more than anyone else in the world. You did well to maintain your children's trust. If only your wife would have honored and appreciated the life and family you two built together. Instead, she was willing to go behind your back and maintain an affair. I honestly don't believe she ever intended to divorce you, Opie. She was too scared and comfortable with you and the kids. I am so glad you found a way to catch her red-handed, so there was no way for her to escape the reality of what she'd done. I wish you, your children, and your mother the best of luck in life. Thank you for sharing your story. Now on to our next story for today. My wife, 34, had issues getting pregnant for a handful of years. After we were blessed to have our first two children, our third child was stillborn. It was very traumatic because we didn't expect it. After two successful pregnancies, we thought everything would be okay. Instead, we arrived at the hospital only to find out the devastating truth. We had to gently explain what happened to our older children, and it wasn't easy. We closed the door to the nursery and never opened it again. Just a few months later, my wife was back to work and she started escaping to the bathroom during family time. Before walking into the kitchen, I looked over my wife's shoulder as she unlocked her phone to discover her passcode. Then I just kept watching as she replied to a message from AP. As we sat on the couch having a movie night with our children, I couldn't react because the kids were there. That night, I checked her phone and found more extremely inappropriate texts to her coworker. They talked about work, but mostly it was about my wife, her grief, and what she needed to feel better. I woke her up in the middle of the night to confront her. She was extremely remorseful and shamed. She said now that I had caught her, reality was sinking in, so she promised to shut it down and cut him off completely. This was followed by many hard talks, but I thought we were moving forward. She told me they never slept with each other, despite all her talk about wanting to take him. I doubted her truthfulness, but I didn't want to believe my marriage was over. We went to therapy, but it ultimately didn't help because all my wife's friends and family justified her behavior by saying they understood. She just needed an escape after suffering such a huge loss. Even the therapist seemed like her behavior was justified because of her grief. Why did she deserve an escape and forgiveness when no one bothered to ask how I was handling the loss? I went through hell, handling my own grief, while giving her a shoulder to cry on, only to find out she was escaping behind my back. She went so far as to tell AP she wanted him in our bed while she was home alone. When I started to consider cheating on her as revenge or to make us even, I realized there was no corrective action I could take to bring back the wife I thought I had. Since she had the approval of her friends, family, and her therapist, I decided to see how her coworkers would feel about her escaping habit. I got permission to hang up my flyer on the bulletin board by vaguely describing it as a way to spread awareness of despicability. The boss was busy at the time, so she let me hang it up. All of my wife's coworkers saw the worst texts she received, besides a text box I wrote describing our family and what we were all doing together, while she had the nerve to send these. When she went into work for her next shift, she received so much criticism and slander that she returned home crying. That's when I gave her a copy of the flyer. There wasn't much she could say in her defense because I knew everything. She wanted me to forgive her and stay married, and that just couldn't happen. She wasn't the woman I married. She gave me up for an escape with another man. I don't see how us losing a child is any excuse for her to cheat on me. I'm sure that if I was the one doing this, I would have been shunned. It was a sweet relief to me that she quit her job. She was suffering from the reality she didn't want to face, and now I'd followed through with the divorce. A woman worthy of a wife's title would never betray the husband she had children with just because they lost a child. They would support each other in the worst of times so that moving forward became possible. They would act as pillars so their children's world could remain stable. So after the divorce, I moved myself and the children onto my cousin's farm. I heard animals can be therapeutic, and that's what I wanted us to be surrounded by. Certainly not a constant reminder of the life we used to live with their mother. She was able to stay in the house since I let her have it in the divorce. I still think she wishes for me to see it her way, but I don't understand how she can justify it. Opie, I am so sorry your wife slept with another man and thought it was okay. It's really shocking that many people in her life accepted this behavior. They didn't realize they were operating as enablers in her life and making you feel like you were crazy for believing it wasn't okay. It's so good that you knew cheating wouldn't solve anything, and this thought was only a sign that you needed to end the marriage. Speaking honestly with each other would have been the solution, but I don't think your wife was willing to admit that what she was doing was wrong, especially not with the approval of her peers. I wonder what she would have thought if you asked her for permission to cheat, since it was apparently an escape and a way to handle the grief. After suffering such a loss, you both suffered the loss of your marriage and family. I'm thankful for the handled this. You needed to create a better, safe place for you and your children, so that's what you did. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. My wife and I knew each other our entire lives before we got married. It was a really sweet story of childhood friends who fell in love young and got married. When we started dating, we were each other's first kiss. She was the only woman that I had ever been with, and I thought the same with her. We were neighbors growing up, and we would often play together as children. I knew her family, and she knew mine. Everybody would always joke with us about how they knew we would be together forever. After we both graduated college, we got married, and we started planning our future. We ended up buying a house for my uncle in our hometown so we could be close to our families. After a couple of years, we decided to start building a family together. We have 2 children, twins, and our life was perfect. Out of the blue, one evening while we were watching a television show, my wife asked me if I regretted never being with another woman. I immediately told her that I didn't. I'll admit that there have been other women I've been attracted to. Sleeping with them had never crossed my mind, though. I loved my wife very much, and she was the only one for me. I asked her about why she brought that up, and she told me that she had just been thinking about it. She explained that she was worried that I would get bored with her. She brushed it off then, and we continued watching our show. When my wife was a teenager, her aunt married a new man. I remember it being a big deal at the time because her aunt went through a very bitter divorce and was staying at my wife's family home for quite some time. When she married the man, she ended up moving out. The man that she married had 2 children of his own around our age, so it felt like we had 2 new friends in the neighborhood. Both were boys, and they were always kind of rowdy. One of them, let's call him Paul, has always been a bit of a problem child. Paul would have wild parties. He would get in trouble, and he slept around quite a bit. Despite all of that, he was always very fun to be around. He was the life of the party. In his adult years, he's calmed down quite a bit. He had a good job, and he was on the straight and narrow. His only major issue was his inability to remain in relationships. They always seemed to fail before they got too serious, and Paul would get pretty beat up about it. Paul was dating a girl that he really liked, and she ended up breaking up with him. He was hurt, so he reached out to my wife and me to talk. My wife, being the sensitive and caring woman that she was, went over to his house to make him dinner and listen to him. I didn't go because I didn't want to overwhelm him. I never expected that anything would happen between them. She came home later that night, and when I asked her about what happened, she was very evasive with her answers. She didn't seem to want to tell me about what Paul said to her. I thought it was fishy at the time, but again, I never thought she was doing anything inappropriate with him. Looking back, a lot of how she was acting after that night seemed like she felt guilty. She was being very generous to me with a lot of things. She kept cooking my favorite meals. She surprised me with small gifts, and she complimented me all the time. She was nice, but it was a little over the top. It felt almost like a child who broke something they shouldn't have been playing with, trying to make up for it. About a week after the night she visited Paul, she went back. She told me she was going to bring him some food just to make sure he was getting something healthy to eat. I offered to come along so I could check in on him, but my wife told me that it would be better if it was just her. Just assumed that it had something to do with him being in an emotional state. I stayed back and put the kids to bed while she went to visit Paul. She came back a few hours later and told me that they had a long talk about everything. She didn't give me any details about what he said. She started to visit Paul by herself a lot more frequently over the next few weeks. As I said before, Paul dated a lot of women and broke up with a lot of women. I had never seen him so distraught over a breakup before. The more time my wife was spending with him, the less it was making sense. She came home one night and I asked her about what was really going on with Paul. I didn't think that she was sleeping with him, but I thought something else was happening. It was just also out of the ordinary. She stuck to her story about Paul being very emotional after the breakup. I offered to maybe go talk to him and give him some advice, but she told me that it probably wouldn't be much help. Regardless of what she said, I was worried about him. He was my family and my friend, and I wanted him to be okay. Over my lunch break at work the following day, I stopped by his house to check on him. At the time this was happening, my wife wasn't working. She was a stay-at-home mom and the kids were in school, so she had all day to do whatever she wanted to do. Her car was in the driveway when I arrived. She didn't tell me she was going to visit Paul that afternoon, so I was a little surprised. I approached the door ready to ring the bell and pop in to see what was going on. Before I even touched it, I could hear noises right on the other side of the door. It sounded like they were having sex and my wife was being pinned up against the door. I was frozen in place. That was absolutely the last thing I expected to see. I couldn't even believe it. I don't know why I did it, but I ended up calling my wife on the other side of the door. I heard her phone go off and I heard them both freeze for a moment while she looked at it and rejected the call. I heard some muffled conversation as Paul asked her if she was okay. My wife told him that it was just a little weird that I was calling in the middle of the day and that worried her. Paul made a joke about having something that could make her forget all about that. They started kissing again and they walked off somewhere else in the house. I stood outside for a few minutes contemplating what I wanted to do. I just caught my wife having sex with Paul. Paul was her cousin, not related by blood, but he was still very much a part of the family. It took me a few minutes before I put everything together. I knew right away that it was over between her and me. Our entire relationship, all of the years we knew each other, was going to be flushed down the toilet. I was going to, and I was going to get proof of what happened before doing so. I knew Paul had a spare key hidden under a rock by his house, so I grabbed it and let myself in. I could hear the noises coming from the bedroom and I made my way there. The door was wide open and I pulled my phone out to take a quick video of both of them. After about 30 seconds passed, I knocked on the door and both of them turned around to look at me. They tried to cover themselves up and explain what was happening. The absolute funniest part of this was my wife chasing me out of the house telling me she was only sleeping with him to help get his mind off the other woman. As if that made it okay. I was flabbergasted. I called off work for the rest of the day and sat in my car while I looked for a good divorce attorney online. I reached out to one and set up a meeting. While I waited for that, I went home and packed a bag to go stay at my parents' house while everything was figured out. I grabbed the kids from school and brought them along with me. My wife was blowing up my phone, but all I did was text her and let her know that I had the kids and they were safe, but I needed time away from her. The next time I saw her, I was serving her with papers. That just wasn't enough for me, though. She cheated on me with her own cousin, destroying our family. I wanted to get back at her for what she did. I thought about it quite a bit, and I realized that not many people would be understanding of their relationship. Again, he wasn't a blood relative, but he was still family. I crafted a heartfelt Facebook post explaining to everybody that after years of being together, my wife and I were divorcing. I explained what happened, sparing very little detail, I might add. A ton of family members commended, saying that what she did was wrong, and they were telling me how sour they were for what I went through. Later that same day, my wife and Paul both reached out to me and asked me to take the post down because they were getting very hateful messages from family and friends alike. I told them that I didn't have to take it down and I didn't plan on it. Both my wife and her cousin were pretty much barred from every family function that we had. They lost a ton of friends, and pretty much everybody in our family shamed them for what they did. We lived in a small community and word travels fast, so when pretty much everybody in town heard that Paul slept with his cousin, it was a little more difficult for him to find new girlfriends. Both of them were humiliated by the post. My wife and I are divorced now, and I was awarded the house and all of our assets because I purchased them all. She has received no spousal support from me, and until she gets a job, I have primary custody of the kids. Opie, I can't believe you had to go through something like this. You trusted your wife with her kind heart to go and help her cousin through a rough time. It honestly sounds like it started that very first night she went over to his house. It definitely seems like she felt guilty about what she did initially, but when you didn't notice right away, she thought she was free to continue. Cheating in general is already bad enough, but cheating with your cousin is disgusting. You made it clear in the post that they weren't blood related, but I don't think that matters. They practically grew up together, and it seems like they were close as a family before that. I think sharing what they did with the rest of the family was the right thing to do. The fact that the rest of the town shamed them for their actions was just a bonus to that. What they did was wrong from several different areas, and they should have been ashamed of it. I'm glad you were treated fairly during the divorce and your children are with a parent that can support them. Divorce is hard on families, and I wish you guys nothing but the best moving forward. Now, let's move on to our next story for today. My girlfriend and I were together for almost 3 years. I met her at work and I had a huge crush on her before I asked her out. When I finally got the courage to do it, she told me she'd been waiting for me to ask her on a date. Everyone in the office thought we were the cutest couple. I thought so too. She was by far the best looking woman I had dated up to that point. That's not saying other women I've dated weren't attractive. They were. But my girlfriend looked like she could be a model. She was absolutely stunning. Our company ended up going bankrupt, and there were mass layoffs throughout. Both my girlfriend and I were laid off. I found another job pretty quickly. It wasn't anywhere near as good as my old one, but there was room for growth, and it gave me health insurance. My girlfriend, on the other hand, was having a more difficult time. She didn't want to settle for something. She worked hard to get where she did in our company, and she felt like she deserved more. I started to notice, when we would hang out, that she had a lot of new things around her apartment. She had new clothes and shoes. She was buying expensive makeup and fancy home goods. She wasn't living like somebody who had lost their job, and I knew unemployment wasn't giving her that much either. I casually asked her about it, questioning how she was able to afford the lifestyle she was living. She told me that she had started freelancing online to make some extra income. I had no reason to doubt that was the case. I knew some people made lucrative careers out of freelancing, so it seemed plausible. About 2 years into our relationship, I asked her if we could move in together. My lease was set to be renewed in a couple of months, and I thought it was a good time for us to take that next step, especially considering it would make both of our bills so much more affordable. She agreed, and I moved in a couple of months later. After we had the original conversation about her freelancing, I never thought much more about it, but the first few weeks of living together, I noticed that she didn't do a lot of work. She always seemed to be hanging out in the bedroom or watching television. She was on her phone a lot, but I didn't think it was for work. I asked her about it again, not trying to be rude, but more so just questioning what it was exactly she did and how often she did it. She just told me that she got most of her work done early in the mornings and had the rest of the time free. One night she and I were getting intimate, and she asked me if we could film it. My first instinct was that it was kind of hot, but I didn't want to be on camera. If the video of us ever got out for any reason, then my employers might see it, and it could be difficult for me to get a job and things like that. She ended up convincing me to do it by promising that my face or any other identifying parts of my body wouldn't be in the video. She seemed to want us, so eventually I agreed. We did our thing and recorded it. It wasn't something I had an interest in ever doing again. Everything was normal for the next few months. We had gotten into a solid routine with each other, and there wasn't anything major going on. She came to me and told me about a conference for freelancers that she was interested in attending. There were going to be a lot of people in the industry that she could network with to get some new clients. I thought it was a great idea. She had already made a pretty good living for herself through her work, and the ability to expand that business was promising. She bought her ticket and went on her way when the time came. It was a weekend-long conference, so I was alone in the apartment for about 3 days. One night, I was feeling particularly alone. I remembered that she recorded us a few months prior, so I grabbed her camera to look for that footage. I hooked the camera up to my computer and opened the video folder to grab the video and put the camera back. I saw that there were hundreds of other videos on the camera. I was curious, so I clicked on one. It was a video of her dancing in a room and stripping. There were countless other videos of her all over the apartment. All of the videos were extremely sexual. I was really curious about why she had them. I had a suspicion about it right away, but I needed some confirmation. I grabbed her laptop and looked through it to confirm if she was camming or not. She had a bookmark folder in her browser called Work, and when I clicked on it, there were several camgirl websites linked. Of course, her information was saved. I could log in and see everything she was posting and everything she was saying with all of her fans. Her account was relatively new, it seemed, but she had some very dedicated followers. There were dozens of direct messages that hadn't been read yet from some of her fans. They were saying very obscene things to her and commenting on her body and things like that. She was role-playing with them to get tips. One of the videos on her page caught my eye because it was the video she had taken with me. I was immediately panicked knowing that there was a video of me on the internet. There were a ton of comments on the video where the men said things like, "I wish that was me." Not long after that video was posted, she posted something about a raffle she was holding for a lucky fan to be able to sleep with her. I felt like I was going to throw up when I read that. I was sick to my stomach. Her job as a freelancer was a lie. She uploaded the video that we had taken together without my consent, and now she was likely on her way to sleep with some random man from the internet. I looked through everything I could on the accounts, and I figured out that she basically held a raffle where men could buy tickets to have a chance to sleep with her. She had about 100 entrants in this raffle. In her emails, I was able to confirm that she was in fact on her way to sleep with the fan that won the raffle. She was going to film it to post online. My girlfriend called me while I was looking at her accounts, and I answered. I was in shock, so I didn't know what to say to her. She asked me if she left her laptop behind. She was worried she lost it on the flight. I told her that it was there. Had she not forgotten it, I might not have known about what happened. It was almost like fate wanted me to figure out what was going on. I knew that I wasn't going to be with her after this. I'm a pretty liberal person, and if she had told me that she had this camming site, I might have understood. I would never have been happy with it, but it would have been something we could have talked about. But she posted a video of me on it, and she was going to cheat on me with a man who won a raffle to sleep with her. There was no way in hell I was going to continue this relationship with her. I called one of my buddies and briefly explained what was going on and told him that I needed a place to crash for a few days. I got as much of my stuff out of the apartment as I could. I slept on it overnight thinking about what I was going to do after finding everything out. When I woke up in the morning, I checked her page out of curiosity. There was a video posted of her with another man. I couldn't stomach watching it, so I just closed it. I was beyond pissed that she had done that. Not only was it cheating, it was irresponsible. She didn't know where that man had been. He could have given her any kind of STD, and she didn't consider that. I decided that I was going to take the sights away from her. She had amassed quite the following, and it looked like it was only growing after she slept with a fan. I had an idea, and I didn't know exactly how feasible it would be, because sites like these don't always seem to care, but I reported her as being underaged. I hoped that it would get the sites taken down so she would be banned from them. I reported that on all of the sites that I knew about. My girlfriend got back home and she messaged me asking where I was. I told her that I knew about her real job and what she had just gone to do. She tried to explain it to me. She told me that she needed more followers and that sleeping with a fan was a good way to get them. She had read articles about other con girls doing similar things and gaining tens of thousands of followers. I wasn't interested in an explanation. She cheated on me, and that's the only way I looked at it. I also shamed her for putting the video that I barely wanted to do online. I told her that it was over and I would be getting all of my things from the apartment as soon as I found another one. She begged me for a second chance and told me that I was more important to her than any of the other stuff. I just didn't care. We broke up and I found another apartment a few weeks later. The last time I ever saw her was when I was moving my furniture out. Out of curiosity, I checked the websites that she had her accounts on and I saw that 3 of them were deleted. I was glad to see that it was the 3 where she had the most followers. She still had 2 other accounts and I knew that she would probably regain the traction she had on the other websites, but even if it was a temporary setback, I was happy with it. Opie, your girlfriend clearly didn't take what you would think about it into consideration at all. Otherwise, she probably wouldn't have had any of the websites that she did. I think it's very messed up that she posted the video that she'd taken with you on her sites. You didn't give any consent for her to do that, and by the way, it seems she almost coerced you into making the video to begin with. That in itself is a huge breach of your trust, and I think she showed her true colors with that. Your girlfriend trying to excuse cheating on you with some random fan as a business-savvy marketing move is ridiculous. Cheating is cheating regardless of the circumstances. She sold raffle tickets to sleep with another man. I agree it is very irresponsible to do that. Unless she ran a full background check, screened him for STDs, and had a bodyguard present while she was there, it just seems incredibly unsafe. From what you described, it doesn't even sound like she really needed a huge bump in followers. You did the right thing by leaving her when you found out. It definitely seems like she didn't have much respect for you as a person because of how often she lied to you. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.